Welcome to this introduction to Graphite AR, an iOS app for quick and precise drawing and modeling in 3D spaces around you. With this app, you can line up sketches with real objects, you can reshape your environment, block out designs at scale, use full body gestures to form 3D shapes, and export them to your favorite desktop software. This fast and nimble utility is a great addition to the toolkit of any designer, animator, video game artist, construction professional, realtor, or architect. So I'm going to give you a quick tour of the main features of the app. You'll notice that this is an augmented reality app, and as such, it needs you to move around a space in order to get a sense of the environment. The cursor in the middle of the screen indicates to you how it's recognizing real-world surfaces. So you'll see there's a bookshelf here where the cursor is attached to it, and the floor it seems to recognize as well. And as you move around, this will change and grow and shape and as it learns the environment. I've also gone ahead and placed a virtual object in the space, and you'll notice how the cursor snaps to the different surfaces of this virtual object. So one of the first things you want to do when you're using Graphite AR is move around the space and let the app get to know the environment you're in. The next thing that you'll want to have a look at and notice is the large circular white button on the right-hand side of the screen. We call that the draw button, and that's the main button you'll be interacting with as you draw objects in the app. For example, we currently have the box tool selected, and if I press it once, and again, and again, and again, it draws a box on the floor. You can use the app in landscape mode here with the button on the right-hand side. You can also use it in portrait mode with the button at the bottom. And you can also flip it around to the other side if you're left-handed. I showed you the box tool just now. There's a number of different 3D primitives and 2D primitives that you can draw. For example, we have the sphere tool, which lets you draw a sphere. There's a sphere sitting on the floor there. We have the three-point rectangle tool. So we can use this to mark out a rectangular shape on the floor. And as we move around, you can see how the object there is attached to the floor. We also can draw circles like this. This is also attached to the floor here. You can see that there. We can hover over on top. You see it's a perfect circle. I'll also show you the Polyline Tool. This tool lets you tap once, again, 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 to make a complex polygon. Okay. So you can create shapes of like multi-point lines as you wish. There you go. There's also a simple line segment tool, which click there, so you can do just a point-to-point line. All these tools are available in the app. And lastly, we have the Freeline Tool, and this is a lot like a tool that you might notice or you might know from Adobe Illustrator or from Photoshop. It's basically a pencil tool. It's a free line drawing tool. So you hold down the button here, the draw button, and you can draw any kind of shape you want. Okay, and that's pinned to the floor right there. Okay. Um, each tool also has a set of what we call modifiers. So you can use these features um, to change the attributes of the tool. So we'll go to the Polyline tool for a moment. I'll just quickly empty the scene here so we have some space to work. Here's the Polyline tool. Okay, it currently has 4 available modifiers. From right to left, we have Solidify, which is currently selected. There's the Extrude Pipe tool, the Extrude Pipe Modifier, the Smooth Modifier, and the Closed Loop Modifier. So I'm just going to switch off Solidify and switch on Smoothing and give you a sense of how that works. So let's make a couple of lines here. And you'll see how once I finish drawing, it averages out those points into a nice smooth curve. We also have closed loop. I've selected both closed loop and smoothing. Give you a sense of how that works. So just like this here. Okay. And it gives you a nice closed shape. Likewise, solidify. Turn off a couple of these options that show you solidify. So with solidify, there you go. It completes your 2D shape and creates a surface with it. And then lastly, Extrude Pipe. I'll show you that one here. Extrude Pipe takes your 2-dimensional line. It can be 3-dimensional if you're not drawing on a flat surface. And it extrudes a 3-dimensional pipe around the shape. So whereas these lines have no real width to them, this line is now an actual 3D cylinder. All right, well, the next thing I'm going to show you is snapping. You'll notice on the right-hand side here, this button lets you set snapping on and off. If I switch snapping off, you'll notice the cursor in the middle of the screen no longer seems to attach to the real-world surface. And basically what we get is a floating cursor that's a few centimeters away from the camera, and we can draw in free space. We can sort of make a complex shape here. All right, like this, like so. Okay, finish there. We had the extrude pipe on, so I'm just going to quickly undo that and turn off the pipe, just so that we have a very simple shape to work with. All right, so here's our line. We're making a complex line. I'm moving back and forth. I'm rotating the camera. Okay, and now we have an arbitrary 3-dimensional line drawing in space. That's so snapping. When we right now it's switched off, but we can switch it back on again using this button on the side. And when I snap, snapping snaps not only to real-world surfaces like these, like the floor and the bookshelf, but it'll also recognize the objects in space that we're working with. So it'll notice, it'll recognize an endpoint of a line right there. It'll recognize intersection, and we can use that to draw more complex shapes now. So we could use that intersection point and draw out from here, maybe turn snapping off, and then draw some more lines here. Okay, and we have that extension to the line right there. Okay, so those are some of the basics of snapping. I'm going to clear the screen again so that we have a blank slate to work with. And I'll also show you a couple of other snapping features. Here we go. We turn snapping on. I'm going to draw a circle on the ground. Okay. And with snapping on, it also recognizes, or should recognize, the center of the circle. There we go. Got it there. Sometimes you need to move up a little closer at the to find the snap point. But there we go. We got the center of the circle, and we can draw concentric circles that way quite easily. So let's find the center point again. It's around here somewhere. There it is. Okay, let's draw from here. Oops. Find it. We need to work on the sensitivity of this. Draw another one. So that's a center snapping. And earlier you saw surface snapping. So we're snapping to the real world floor, but you can also snap to the surface of actual objects. So here we go. We're snapping to the top of a box. I'm going to draw another box on top of it, like that. Maybe we want to snap to the side of the box, like this. Okay. Draw out like that. And start to build sort of complex three-dimensional shapes that way. And that's some of the basics of snapping. Let's delete the scene again. And I'm going to show you grids now. So that's this tool here. That's a grid tool, grid function. And grids start to let you kind of regulate your drawing in a more precise way. Here we have the grid snapping to the bookshelf, or we can move it around. You see how the grid sort of follows the cursor. So you can easily switch grids on and off by just tapping that button on the side whenever you need it. And when you start drawing with a grid on, it will pin the grid in place and then let you, it'll sort of snap to the intersection points of the grid. So you can set a very precise drawing. For example, if you want to, let's see, follow the 90-degree angles of the grid, you can do that, like that. Okay, so you have, you'll notice how as you move, when the grid is floating and you move it around, the grid will follow your cursor as it attaches to different points of your model or your environment. And so the grid does interact with snapping with the cursor. We can, for example, turn snapping off, and suddenly the grid is floating in free space with the cursor. You get a sense here of how close the cursor is. Grids are really great for giving you a sense of where the cursor is and how you're moving in 3D space. So when I'm just going to flip on and off the snapping here, and you'll see how the grid and the cursor move from way up close to down on the floor. I'm going to leave the grid here floating in free space to follow the camera here. I'll show you another feature of grids. You'll notice next to the grid here is a pin feature. When we press that, it stops the grid wherever you are. And now you have this grid in 3D space like this. Okay, it's just fixed in space, and we can use it. So right now we're not snapping, but we can turn snapping back on. Okay, and now we're snapped to this grid that we've placed very intentionally in the middle of the room. There we go. So there we go. Try this. Box out like that. There you go. All right. You turn the grid off again, and you have those objects. And the grid, the pinning remains in place, so we can switch it on and off if we want to, or we can repin as we like. So turn pinning off and turn snapping off, and the grid is now following the cursor. So I'm going to say one of the useful things about using grids in this non-snapping way is to also give you a sense of added depth perception, because you'll notice the grid has a very kind of faint translucency to it, so you can move it through objects, get a sense for where things are. Okay. So in the shape of your object. So see how there's a kind of sort of intersects with the objects, which is kind of a handy way of getting a sense for what you're drawing using the grids. Of course, if I'm drawing something, like let's say I'm going to draw a rectangle in space, and I start drawing here, it will pin the grid automatically as I draw. Maybe I'll turn snapping on. Okay. And then it'll return the grid to follow the cursor. So anytime you have the grid turned on and you start drawing, it'll automatically pin the grid for you so that it'll be useful. And as I mentioned before, you can also pin intentionally just by tapping the pin button there, and turn on and off the pinning. All right, a couple more features that I'm going to show you. I'm just going to switch the grid off for now. A very useful feature in the Pro version of the app is dimensioning. So we can use this to draw a little more precisely what we want. So say we're going to draw a rectangle here. It's going to tell us in millimeters, in fractions of meters, what's the size of the thing we're drawing. Okay. We're going to draw something, let's say about 1/2 meter square. Go about there, draw this 1/2 meter, and draw it out to about there, another 1/2 meter. Approximates. And there we go. So that's about 1/2 meter square on the floor. One thing that you may have noticed already, but I haven't shown you specifically, is the idea of selecting. So let's turn snapping off for a moment. You can just tap the objects on the screen and select multiple objects, and that gives you the ability to delete. If you press the delete button, it will remove those objects, which is handy. And you can also undo and redo. Okay, it's a pretty standard features, but nice to have when you're editing. And lastly, the one last thing I want to show you in this quick intro is the background settings feature here, which lets you change the background to a very bright background, dim background, which is the default, or a completely dark background, which is also handy. It'll continue to recognize all of your surfaces in your room, and it will try to understand them and learn as an augmented reality app you'd expect. But it just hides the background. And this is useful if you want to draw something and maybe you want to share it with someone, but you don't want to show them your environment. So you can, of course, take screenshots of what you're creating and share those. If you want to, for example, hide the user interface where you're taking a screenshot, you can just sort of click the logo once, and you'll hide all of the user interface buttons. If you have the Pro version of the app, you can press it again and just remove the logo completely and take just an empty screenshot. And there you go. That is a very basic intro to some of the core features and functionality of Graphite AR. A few things that haven't mentioned, which we'll go into in more detail in other videos. We have a side menu here, which you can use for exporting your model into different formats. You can also follow some intro tour, get video tutorials like this one, and contact us for support and questions and send us feedback if you'd like. And there you have it. Well, thanks so much, and hope to hear